couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine was driving home from work and he had a flat tire on the way home. His jack broke when he was trying to change the spare tire onto the car. And so as a result of that, when he and I were texting back and forth that evening, his replies were short and he didn't respond for a while. And then the next day I asked him if I had made him upset. Jokingly, I said, "Did I make you mad by what we were texting about?" And he said no. And then he explained that his perspective was a little irritable and frustrated because he had had the flat tire on the way home and it disrupted his plans. Well, life is like that sometimes. We have disruptions, we have flat tires, car trouble, speed bumps along the way, and what we thought was going to be a smooth journey sometimes turns out not to be that way. Over the past 3 weeks, we have looked at some of the messages that God sent through his prophets. And so this morning, I thought we would do the very same thing and look at something that was really a conversation between God and one of his prophets. So if you want to follow along in your Bibles, I hope that you'll grab a copy and turn to the book of Habakkuk, chapter 3, verses 17, 18, and 19. Habakkuk is one of the Old Testament minor prophets, and his book is unique in this sense. In Jeremiah, Hosea, Amos, other minor prophets, and major prophets too, we have a record of the prophets speaking to God's people on behalf of him and speaking to God on behalf of the people. But the book of Habakkuk isn't like that at all. There's not one single sermon that Habakkuk delivered to the children of Israel. The book of Habakkuk is a disillusioned conversation that went on between Habakkuk and God. Israel had gone through another series of flat tires, speed bumps, and traffic issues. And so Habakkuk wanted to talk with the Lord about what was going on. And so at the conclusion of the book, after the conversation that Habakkuk had with God, here is his own confession, Habakkuk chapter 3, verses 17, 18, and 19. "Though the fig tree does not bud, and there is no fruit on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, though the flocks disappear from the pen, and there are no herds in the stalls, yet I will celebrate in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord is my Lord. The Lord my Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like those of a deer, and enables me to walk on the mountain heights." After a difficult conversation with God, I won't pretend anything different. The book of Habakkuk is not very long. If you want to read all 3 chapters, you will see that Habakkuk was disappointed in God. He was disillusioned. He wondered what God was doing. But at the conclusion of the conversation, Habakkuk expressed his faith in God in the very same way that in the book of Job, there are 40 chapters or so of Job's disillusionment and anger, wondering what God was doing. And then the conclusion is that Job said, "God, I know that you know what you're doing and I'm going to trust you." So with that in mind, I want us to look at this idea of engine trouble, flat tires, and speed bumps today to see what lessons you and I might learn from what Habakkuk had in his conversation with God. The first thing that I want you to see is that difficulties are a certainty for everyone in life. We don't wonder if trials are going to come. We know that trials are going to come. One of the most prominent passages in all of Scripture about trials is James chapter 1, verses 2, 3, and 4. "Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." James did not choose the word if. He said, "Consider it all joy when various trials come into our lives." And so Habakkuk discovered that here. He discovered that trials weren't just something that Egypt or Babylon or other people would encounter, but that even he would encounter, even Israel would encounter. We have just finished, or at least I have just finished, a season of summer camps, and people always are able to tell when I have spent a lot of time out in the sun over a particular week of camp because I will be as red as a fire engine. I don't get brown. I don't get any sort of healthy tan. I go from red to peeling to white, and then the cycle repeats all over again. It's a certainty. And so here in this passage, if you see what Habakkuk wrote here, he did not say, if the fig tree does not bud, or if there ever is no fruit on the vines. He recognized the reality of the trials. They're a certainty. And so for each one of us, we can just accept the fact that even if we don't like what is happening, sometimes trials are going to come into our lives. The second thing that I want to see from the passage is the confusion related to those trials. Now, if you know a little bit of Bible background, you might remember that Habakkuk was discouraged because the Babylonians were marching on Judah. They were encircling the nation, and they were about to overtake Judah as a country. And this issue probably was going to be that they would be taken off into exile. And so Habakkuk wrestled with God to say, God, I understand that trials happen to bad people. The consequences of their actions are naturally that difficult things happen. But God, we are your chosen people. We're the people that you spoke to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and said that we would be your cherished possession, your own nation. Why are trials happening to us? And why are trials happening to us? Through the Babylonians, we may have done what is bad, but they have done what is much worse. God, why is this happening to us? And perhaps you faced that question as well. I've just returned from speaking at a ministers' conference, and one of the issues that was raised among the people who are at the conference is, why is this second round of COVID hitting us? We struggled for about 18 months. We have tried to hold our churches together. God, why are you allowing this to happen? Why haven't you stopped what is going on? And sometimes trials are that way for us. I don't know if you ever have picked up your phone and read a text message and raised an eyebrow and said, I don't understand what this is. And then the person later sent a text that says, sorry, that was not meant for you. I sent it to the wrong person. And we can then understand, oh, yes, I see this text wasn't meant for me. It was meant for somebody else. That's why I didn't understand it. And sometimes we might have that view about trials. We may think, God, surely this could have gone to someone else. Surely this was meant for someone else, but it has come to me instead. And so sometimes we are confused by the trials that come our way. Habakkuk was. The next thing that I want you to see is that even though Habakkuk was confused by what God was doing and what God was not doing, he still was able to receive comfort from God. You can see in this passage that Habakkuk did not end with despair. He didn't end with a sense of disillusionment. Though he did go through a period of wondering what God was doing, his confession here is one that is hopeful. It is one that is strong. It is one that is resolute, because he was able to see that God was at work through all of this. I really like what Habakkuk said there in verse 19. He said, the Lord, my Lord, is my strength. When I don't think that I can go another step, when I'm irritated, when I'm frustrated, when I'm discouraged, when I'm weary, when I'm fatigued, I don't have to rely on my own abilities to get me through. I can count on God to be my strength. He is working even in the difficult times. He is sustaining me when I feel like I can't carry my burdens any longer. He invites me to cast all my cares upon him because he really does care for me. In the midst of our difficulties and our struggles, God always is working in our lives. And I like the fact that God shows up at just the right time. When I was growing up, Saturday mornings never were the day for me to sleep late. They are for some people, and I don't have any problem with that. But Saturdays for me were the day that cartoons came on. And so I wanted to get up early in the morning. Even as a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old boy, I didn't have to have an alarm. I would awaken early on Saturday morning. As a little 6-year-old boy, I would walk down the hallway, kind of wash my face, smooth down my hair, shave, get ready for the big day that was coming. And I would be sitting right in front of the television when cartoons began at 6 o'clock. My favorite cartoon came on at 7 o'clock in the morning the Super Friends. The Super Friends was the cartoon that detailed all of the superheroes who were friends who formed the Justice League of America, and they battled against the Legion of Doom, who were all of their arch enemies. Those cartoons always had the same premise. When all hope seemed to be lost, that's when the superhero would show up. That's when Batman, the Flash, Superman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, at the last possible moment, when it seemed like the world was doomed, they would make their entrance and then rescue. Sometimes God may act a little more slowly than we wish he would. Sometimes he doesn't act on our timetable. But what Habakkuk discovered is that God always works exactly on time. He is filtering our circumstances through his perfect wisdom and his perfect love. And so he knows when he needs to do what he wants to do. We may become impatient, we may become frustrated, but we can count on the fact that God is always working right on time. Also, we can see in this passage that God always works in the right ways. Habakkuk did not say here in this passage that God was going to change what the Babylonians were going to do. He did not get a word of, hey, you know what? I have decided that I'm not going to allow the Babylonians to overtake Judah. Instead, what Habakkuk learned was that even in the difficulty, God would make his feet like those of a deer, enable him to walk on the mountain heights. He said, even in the difficulty, even in the steep climbs, God will enable me to keep going. He doesn't promise to change our circumstances. He promises to change us. One of the ways that God works in our trials is that he enables us to become stronger so that the next trial isn't nearly as much of a strain on us. And so God works in the right time and God works in the right ways. Well, then we're left with this one final thought. You and I have a choice to make about the trials that come into our lives. Some people complain, some people become bitter, some people withdraw from human contact, they become angry at God, and so they turn away from the church, and they say, what has happened to me, what is happening to me isn't fair, I don't like it, and so their demeanor becomes one of negativity and pessimism and one that's hard to be around. But Habakkuk's response is what our response needs to be. Despite the fact that the unfolding of the latest circumstances frustrated him, discouraged him, he still said, God, I'm going to trust in you. I know that you know what you're doing, and so I will look for the ways that you work in me to change me, to shape me, to form me, to rub off rough edges during this trial, this difficulty, so that you will be able to work more effectively through me. And so I hope those words will give you some challenge and inspiration, encouragement throughout the rest of the week. Let's close together in a word of prayer. God, we thank you for the faithfulness that you have shown in our lives. God, even through difficulties, even through trials, you have maintained your faithfulness and your provision for us, and we count on you